I want you to think of the last time you felt like something was off within your body. It could have been a persistent cramp, a migraine, or any other symptom. Were there any consistent patterns in your symptoms that affected your health? And now I want you to remember what you did about it. Did you go to the doctor? Did you change your diet? And most importantly, did you listen to your body or did you ignore it? Intuition, by definition, is a thing that one knows or considers likely from an instinctive feeling rather than conscious reasoning. We all have that feeling and voice of intuition within us, but how often do we listen to it? We must not let fear, hypochondria, or apathy affect our intuition, but rather we must differentiate it as that of a still and calm voice that is sure of itself. We have it for a reason, and it's there to guide us. And this is not to say that logic should be ignored, but I found in my experience that the outcome is best when I have used both intuition and logic. I was 18 at the time when I first started experiencing what I would later on learn to be a hormonal imbalance, which was a pivotal moment in my health journey to following my intuition. I was taking the contraceptive pill called Janette, and I was prescribed this pill for some skin issues I was experiencing at the time. And this particular pill targets skin issues by acting as an anti-androgen, which is a testosterone blocker. It also has a slightly higher dosage of estrogen than other commonly prescribed birth control pills. And after a bit of time had passed while taking it, I started experiencing a range of strong symptoms. And with no medical advice to go off, and the only warning I received before being prescribed the pill was that in some rare cases, women got blood clots, and that was it. I had to rely solely upon noticing my symptoms and this undeniably strong gut feeling I had that something was off. I was experiencing low energy and mood changes, and where I once felt relatively positive and upbeat, I now felt as though my entire personality had changed. So I decided to come off the pill. And without any knowledge of what might happen next, my symptoms hit me like a ton of bricks. My acne came back, and even worse this time. My mood was lower than ever, and it was a shock to my system. So I went down to my GP seeking medical help to help me with my symptoms, but the only thing that they suggested was to go back onto the contraceptive pill. But once again, I couldn't ignore that little voice in my head telling me that something was wrong. And I was in a difficult position because on one hand, I didn't react well to being on the pill, but coming off it seemed to be even worse. I soon discovered something called PBCS, post-birth control syndrome. This is when women experience changes in symptoms after discontinuing the use of hormonal birth control. And I found in my research that 60 to 70% of women experienced psychological symptoms such as mood swings and anxiety, and 57% of women experienced mild to moderate acne. This was the confirmation I was looking for and what I never received beforehand. So I started exploring alternative medicine routes while working alongside my local GP in an attempt to rebalance my hormones. And I read the book called Beyond the Pill by Dr. Jolene Brighton, who's a functional doctor who specializes in PBCS, and I learned about the appropriate tests I needed to request in order to figure out what was going on inside my body. So I went down to my local GP and I requested for a full thyroid panel to rule out any thyroid issues. I asked for my testosterone and estrogen levels to be checked through bloods, along with a range of other vitamin levels. I patiently awaited my results, and my results came back as clear. Once again, the birth control pill was suggested by my GP, but I was stubborn. I knew that I was suffering from a severe hormonal imbalance, and I knew that taking the contraceptive pill was not a long-term option for me. This is when I discovered the world of naturopathy, and which was another pivotal moment in my health journey and has set the standard for any medical appointment I attend now. And in my 1-hour initial consultation, we covered what seemed to be everything under the sun. We checked through a list of various symptoms, and the length of it might give you a good idea of just how in-depth these consultations are. And I took a hormonal saliva sample test, which tested my cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone levels. And while my blood tests from my GP came back as being completely clear, my hormonal saliva sample test stated otherwise. My results showed that my cortisol was extremely high during evening times, which is the time our bodies should be winding down from our day. My estrogen and progesterone levels were low, and my testosterone was bordering just between the normal and the high range. Where was I going with this? So up until this point, all of my inklings had been confirmed over time. My hormonal imbalance timeline happened over the course of about a year or so, and my final confirmation that whatever I was doing beforehand was not right for me came right at the end of my journey. I felt a rather large breast lump, a rapidly growing one too, and I was in denial and ignored it for a really long time, but by the time I was done ignoring it, it had doubled in size. So I booked in to see a breast specialist, and she shared her concerns with me about the size of the lump, and I was told that I would need surgery from the first consultation. And I remember being really stressed at the time because I was only 22 and I didn't even know it was possible to get breast lumps at 22. But 2 biopsies and a surgery later, the experience was not painless, to say the least. It was benign, thankfully, but the test came back as showing that it was a fibroadenoma, which is a benign breast tumor. And I hadn't even bothered to ask what causes it right until the very end. And when I asked what causes fibroadenomas, the answer was hormonal changes. My final confirmation. My hormonal imbalance was not one to sit back and endure, as many of us do, but my journey to balancing my hormones was not only important, but necessary. I started tracking my cycle and my symptoms throughout the month, and I learned that your menstrual cycle is a reflection of your health and can often be seen as your 5th vital sign. And when you have a healthy menstrual cycle, your basal body temperature, cervical mucus, and cervical position fluctuate similarly each month. It's normal to experience different symptoms at different parts of your cycle, but the key is knowing what and not accepting it when it is more than mild. I followed these 6 pillars of health, and I now refer back to these 6 pillars anytime I feel like I'm off balance. And when I feel like these are all in check, I refer to my tried and true trio. I book in to see my GP, I explore alternative medicine routes like seeing my naturopath or booking in for some acupuncture, and I notice my symptoms, and I work on being in a constant and conscious state of awareness within my body. I notice when something is wrong, and I do something about it. So there were 2 important lessons I learned alongside my lesson about intuition. And the first one was that just because I'm young doesn't mean I'm immortal. I looked at other people living the university life consisting of no sleep, poor diet, and minimal exercise, and I thought that I could do that too and I would be fine, but I couldn't, and I wasn't. And I learned that my youth is not something to take for granted, but rather an opportunity to build up longer-lasting, healthy habits from a young age. And the other lesson I learned was that the younger I was, the harder I found it to ask further questions. I felt like I had to go along with whatever the medical professionals suggested, including those for alternative medicine routes too, and it's a false narrative that can be detrimental to the outcome of solving a health issue. I trust my physicians when I find a trustworthy one, but I trust myself too. So I gave the theme of this TEDx event a lot of thought over the past couple of months, the things we don't see. And I thought about how I would interweave this idea into my talk, and I came to a conclusion. That when it comes to our body, it might not necessarily be that we don't see it thanks to our intuition, but rather, are we listening? So if there is one message you take away from this today, let it be this. When your body speaks to you, listen. Thank you.